Hey y'all, it's Dakota Martinez here coming to you. Just wanted to record a little video of updating one of my blog posts from a couple of years ago on how to build a backend um, Rails application that's an API only mode that uses JSON Web Tokens for auth, implementing the Devise JWT gem. And at that point, fast JSON API serializer. In this tutorial, I'm going to upgrade it to the JSON API serializers gem, which is the fork of that Netflix gem that is no longer being maintained. In this version, we'll be using Rails 7, Ruby 3.2, and the newer versions of Devise and Devise JWT. So all up-to-date versions. Haven't updated the post in a while, so I figured I'd do that and record a walkthrough. So I have gone through this already once today. Unfortunately, I was sharing the wrong screen as I went through it. So I'm just going to go through this one again. You're not going to see me revising my old blog post because I already did that, but I'll be following along with the one that already has been updated. And I'll try to talk a little bit about the things that are different, but you can just, if you're not interested, you can focus on the stuff that's going on now. So here we go. So now hopefully you're seeing the right screen. And I forget how to see which screen you're seeing. Please be the right one. Okay. I'm gonna I'm pretty sure it is. So let's go. I'm terrified. Hopefully this won't be that long. All right. Here we go. So this is the upgraded version of the tutorial. It was originally inspired by a post on Tech Compose. The Devise and Devise JWT gems are great. They're the ones that I'm using mainly for this. There was a blog post on token revocation strategies that was also helpful in putting this together. And again, we're going to the JSON API serializer gem this time because the fast JSON API gem is no longer being maintained. So what we're going to do first is create a new Rails app. I had to start over a couple times because copying and pasting this from my site led to problems. Make sure you type this, particularly the flags. For some reason, when you copy and paste, the flags are not recognized properly. So you want to make sure you type it. And again, I'm on Node version 16.7, Ruby 3.2. This is the beginning of 2023 right now for anyone watching in the future. I want to make a new repo here. I'm not in the right spot. So let's go to development, resources. Okay, and I'm going to make another one here. We'll do Rails new and then Rails Devise JWT template. And we're going to make it API only mode. And then we're going to make it a database of PostgreSQL. And then we'll make it, and we're going to skip test unit because we're going to use RSpec. So we'll do that. And then we're going to have to double check this. I'm going to make sure that this didn't screw up again. So we'll go open the template. And I'm going to check a couple of things to make sure that we got the right stuff going on. First, let's look at environment application. It should say API only true. Nice, it does. That's good. And then we should have a database YAML with Postgres, and we do. Okay, good. It's a good start. I'm gonna close this guy, and we'll keep following along with the updated tutorial here. So I'm gonna reorganize a little bit here. Okay, so my first step after I've made the repo is I need to configure some Rack middleware for cores. So I want to allow cross-origin resource sharing here because this is an API. I want to be able to make requests cross-origin. Before I had to create this file. Now it is already created. I just need to uncomment these lines of code, and for the origins, I'm going to replace this with localhost 3000. And then for the gem file, I'm going to go over and take a look at where rack cores is. I'm going to uncomment that. Cool. So a lot of this stuff, I think I changed this section because the flag on API only mode was not working properly. So that's no, that's it. That is what it is. Okay. And then we're going to add these gems in here to the gem file. And this is going to let us have device and also the serializers. We went over the course pretty quick. So just want to also say we're going to need to add in inside of our resource section here, we also want to expose an authorization header that's going to be used by Devise JWT to recognize that basically to step in for what cookies would normally do with Devise. So we need to make sure we got that. After we got our new gems in there, we can run bundle install to get those installed, and then we'll do an initial commit here. And then our first main new step is to configure device. We're going to do Rails generate device install here. And then we get some notes about what we need to do. First being in config environments development. We need to go and add this action mailer configuration line. I'm going to change mine a little bit from what they recommend because I'm actually going to be using port 4000 in dev, just with the anticipation I'm going to be running a React server client side as well, or on my local machine rather, on this, which would normally be on this port. So I'm going to put 4000 here. And then the other thing we want to make sure we do at this point is inside of the device config, inside of the initializer that just got created, we want to go and take a look at the navigational formats option. Oops. And it is commented out currently. We want to add this in and make sure that it's an empty array because we're not going to be doing any redirecting. We're doing this via the API, so we're just sending requests and getting responses just in JSON format. So we want to have this empty because we're not sending HTML stuff like that. Cool. Okay. So after that, we're going to create the user model. We'll maybe just add to commit this to initial device config. And then we're going to make the user model. So Rails generate device user. And then for that, we're going to probably just leave the defaults here, what we had set up. So that's the these options for device. We're going to remove a couple of these a little bit later, but we won't do it just yet. And then routes, we have device for users. Again, this is going to change a little bit in a bit. And then we have our migration, which I think we're gonna leave these be for now as well. So we'll do Rails DB create and then DB migrate. And then we'll add that. Add devise user model. Okay, so then we're going to go in and create the controllers and routes. We're going to create a couple of controllers. And the reason we're doing this is we want to customize what happens with these controller actions and in order to be working with JSON. So we're going to generate them so we can override a couple of the methods that they have. So we'll do Rails generate device controllers, users, and then the controllers are going to be sessions and registrations. And it's going to tell us that we should go into our routes and tell Devise that we want to use our controllers and not Devise's controllers. We're going to do that in a minute. But first, we're going to add some customization to these controller files themselves. So we'll go to registrations first. And what we're doing here first for both of them is we're going to respond to JSON. So at the top, we'll have respond to JSON. And then I'll copy that. We're going to put it in the sessions controller as well. Oops, sessions controller as well. There we go. And we'll get rid of the untracked version of this. So we have, okay, so we got both of them. And so for registrations, it looks like actually we're going to do that in a minute. But first, we're going to go hook these up so that they're actually going to be used. So we set up our controllers. We're telling them that we want to respond to JSON, but they're not going to get used by Devise yet until we go into the routes file and update our Devise for users call. So in here, we want to replace what we have Devise for users with this code, which is going to do a couple of things. It'll customize the path names. So instead of sign in the URL, it'll be login. And then for sign out, it'll be logout. And for registration, it'll be sign up. So we'll have those strings, login, logout, and sign up. Those will be part of the URLs. And then the sessions and registrations controller will be pointing to our controllers that are inheriting from the ones defined by Devise. All right, so we can see, oops. We can see those controllers. They both inherit from the Devise version. So we're able to customize what's going on with that Devise controller as much as we want. And we're going to be doing that in particular to customize the status codes and like the JSON format of our responses that are connected to authentication, right? Whether it be sign in or sign out or registration. So the next piece we're going to have to do is some Devise JWT configuration. First, we'll set up these controllers. So we'll do, okay, set up our own versions of sessions and registrations controllers. Okay, and then we're going to go and configure Devise JWT. So this again is going to go in the Devise initializer file. I usually put this at the bottom. And what this is doing is it's going to configure Devise to work with the JWTs, in particular when we're dispatching a request to get a new one and when we're revoking one. We're going to also here, we're going to set the expiration time. So how long till the token will expire. And then we also have to use set up the secret that the app is going to use for making the token. And that's going to come from the application secret key base that we're going to fetch from the Rails credentials. I didn't mention earlier, one of my plans with this is to turn this into a template repository that can be reused so that this configuration is not something you would have to do out of the box if you know you want to start off an app and use these packages, these gems. So in that process, one of the things you're going to have to do is to regenerate these credentials, because that's something that generally is part of doing Rails new. But this is just connected to how long they're going to last, and also indicates which requests are connected with dispatching a new token or revoking an existing one. And connected to this, we need to set up a revocation strategy for how revoking tokens should work. And there's a blog post here that if you're interested in reading more about this, feel free to check it out. Let's spell gem correctly here. And the Devise gem that we're using, Devise JWT, has 3 strategies out of the box. And the one that they're recommending is the one that we're going to go with here, which is to attach an additional field to the user's table that has a JTI, which is a short for JSON Web Token ID. And it's used as a claim to uniquely identify a particular token. So the way it's going to work is when the token gets dispatched for a particular user, the claim is taken from that JTI column in the model. And then that's been that one is created when the user record is originally created. And every time that an authenticated action occurs, the token that comes in is that claim is matched against the column for that user. And so the authentication only succeeds if they're the same. So it knows it can find the user by that claim. And then when the user requests to sign out, that column changes. So if that column changes, then the token will no longer log that user in. So that's kind of how this works. And to get it, we're going to actually run this migration command. This command to create a JTI column, add it to the users table. We're adding in index and unique as little options there, but they actually are not, they're not taken. So you actually do need to add these in. So in string, you got to do null false to indicate you don't want to allow this column to be empty at the database level. And then also the index, we're indexing this column, and it should be unique as well. So there should be no two users that have the same JTI, because this is going to be used to identify a particular user that they're logged in. So it definitely has to be unique. So then we're going to do that. We have to add those guys in there. And the unique index again is there so that we're for sure not going to have two users with the same JTI, because this is a way of uniquely identifying who's logged in. So we need to make sure that that doesn't happen. So in the last step for this is we need to look at the user model. And inside of our user model, we'll just use the command P. A couple of changes we're going to make here. We're removing the rememberable and recoverable. The rememberable, I believe, is session based. We don't really, we're not using session cookies for this. So it won't make as much sense. Recoverable. I haven't researched too much into what recoverable does. I haven't used it all that much, to be honest. But what we're going to end up with are the ones that are most important for getting this to work in our situation, which are database authenticatable, which is allowing us to use the encrypted password and the email password confirmation. Registerable, which is adding those endpoints for being able to sign up. And then we're going to add in the validatable, right? So we can add additional validation rules about like what needs to be true about users in order for them to save. So that's important to keep that. We're going to add in these two options. We're going to add JWT authenticatable and also JWT revocation strategy self. And this is connected with this strategy, the revocation strategy that we're including, which is, again, this is included in the source code for Devise JWT. So we're using the JTI matcher strategy here, and then self is kind of how we indicate that that's the choice that we've made here. There is a note in that other blog post that I've replicated in my README, which is to be aware that the strategy makes use of JWT payload method in the user model. So if you need to kind of modify this or use it in some way, you need to make sure you're calling super in here. But in this case, I didn't have that situation. I needed to do it, but I included it just for honor's sake to their the original post. Just definitely, this is a tribute. This is very loosely different from the post that was linked. It's just brought up to date since that one has come out. In our case, we're not going to interact directly. So at this point, we're ready to run Rails DB migrate to add the JTI column. And then we're ready to make a commit. So we'll do add Devise JWT config. All right, so then the next piece is going to be related to the serializers. We're needing to be able to customize. I'm going to close everything real quick so we can start from a more clear version of this. We'll collapse everything too. The goal with the serializers is we want to be able to customize what comes back from the API when we're working with users. In particular, there's some stuff in the schema that we don't want to include. We're not going to want to send the encrypted password. We're not going to want to send it the JTI either. So the serializer is going to help us control what comes back. And we're going to get back into those controllers as well, because that's where we're going to actually be more in charge of what actually is sent back from our server to our client when we make these authentication requests. So I'm going to make a serializer for users. If my terminal responds, cool. Serializer, user, ID, email, and we're actually going to, I'll include it for now. We're going to replace this, but later I'll put this in for now, and we can come in and shift it out in a second. So we have a serializer, user serializer. It's including JSON API serializer, and the attributes are there. And the way that we access information for records is we create a new instance of the serializer and pass in the user that we're serializing, call serializable hash on it, and then get data attributes. And that's the stuff we want. And if we convert that to JSON, that'll be just great. If we're working with multiple records, we will have to do something a little bit awkward. So we do have to do something like this. We have to map over the serializable hashes data, and then for each one of those things, get the attributes and convert that to JSON. So that's a little bit awkward, but we can do it. It'll be right. This is a little more awkward than active model serializers, but it also allows you to be more intentional with what you're doing, and it performs a little better. That's the main reason you choose this one. So what we're going to do is we are going to, in order to make use of this serializer, we have to open up our controllers again. So we're going to start off with the registrations controller. And then we're going to add to the bottom a private method for respond with. And it's going to take in a resource and options, which will be optional. It'll be an empty hash out of the box. And then we're going to check if the resource is persisted. And what this does is it's going to check basically, we're in the registrations controller here. So this is going to happen if we get success and we were successfully registering a user, we got a persisted resource here. This is essentially what's going to happen on success, right? So if we were able to successfully create and save a new registered user, then the resource was persisted, and we're going to be able to customize what comes back. I'm going to actually just copy and paste this piece. We're going to render JSON with the status code of 200, message is signed up successfully. And in our data, we're going to use our serializer, pass in the resource, and invoke serializable hash data attributes. And because we're rendering this as JSON, it works even without adding the to JSON there. It's okay. And then in the else, similarly, we're going to render a similar format. But in this case, we're going to have a status with a message, and oh, it looks like this is a little strange. So I added the status here, added it there. But looking at this, I also probably would want to have I have status and data coming, and I've got status and message, but I probably also would want to have a code of 422 because that's the actual code. And then we'll do something like that. So I can customize that a little more. The message is really what we're going to consume on the client anyway, but we're also going to convert the errors on the resource to full messages and turn that into a sentence. So we'll get something a little more full readable about why the persistence of the user failed. It looks like I'm missing an end on this respond with, so I'll add that as well. Good deal. Okay, so then we're going to do something a little bit different in the sessions controller. So we'll move over there now. And we're also going to make this private. And in this case, we're going to respond with and accept a resource and options, which is defaulting to an empty hash. And in this case, I think I did that on the other one, right? Have a space. Yeah. In this case, what we want to do is we're only handling a success case within the sessions controller here. We will the actual the way that this works internally is respond with only gets called on successful authentication in this case. So there's an error message that's automatically generated in the other case. And we can't use something like resource.persisted because it'll always be true here because we're in the sessions controller and we're really just trying to log them in. So we can't check if the resource is saved already because it always will be. Well, in theory, right? If they got the email right, if it actually matches up with a user that exists, it's so it works a little bit differently internally. This, what we're doing, is only going to affect the happy path, right? If someone authenticates correctly, this is going to control what they see. So code 200, and then we'll do message logged in successfully. And then our data will be, we'll make a new instance of the UserSerializer. And then we'll use the serializable hash. And I think I might have had a misspelling in here because I had this. Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. And then data attributes. We'll pull out the data and attributes there. And that'll be the data that we send in the response. And the other thing, I just want to add a little conditional logic for how to handle the destroy piece. Not necessarily something we need to have. It's just going to customize what happens when you log out. And we're checking here if the current user exists. Basically, we're checking, is there a valid token in the headers at that point? And if there is, then it'll send logged out successfully. And if not, it'll couldn't show an active session, which is really like they're not logged in anyway, and they're trying to log out. They're going to get a 401 back in that case. We could just not do this. And then I think it would default to just always sending a 200, but I'm adding that in there. And then when we're doing this, there's a little demo I wanted to pull in here because when we're working with a serializer, one of the main reasons that we do that is that we can have more control over how we see data coming back. And in this case, we have a user serializer and we have these 3 attributes. If we wanted to control what created at looked like with a little more detail, then we can add an attribute for that. So we can do attribute created date. And we can, as a block, we can pass a block to this NED. And the block will accept the record being serialized. So what we can do is we can say if the user, and I should say if the user I don't know why I just did user. User's always going to exist, right? I think it should be this. Excuse me. And then I think I put these in out of order. So this should be month, day, year. And this will give me a little more control over what I get back. We can look, if you want to look at more info, you can look at the repo, what else is possible. But at this point, let's do a sanity check. We want to actually try this out and make sure that these endpoints that we've created and customized actually behave the way that we would expect. So for that, we can start up a Rails server. And it's running on port 3000. Okay. So I had a couple of things that I mentioned. Okay, no, that's why I skipped ahead a little bit. I want to, before I go and run the server, I want to actually control where it's going to go. So we're going to go to Puma RB, config Puma RB. And then this port, we want to change it to 4000 because I want it to run on port 4000 instead of 3000. I think that's all I need to do at this point because I already did the other configuration for the action mailer. So I think that's good. And now when I run Rails S, it should boot up on 4000, which is what I wanted. All right. So then what we're going to do is we're going to send a post request to login at this URL. I'm going to go to Postman and we'll send this. This is our body. Send a post. We get invalid email or password, which makes sense because we don't actually have any users yet. So let's try to post to sign up. Now we're getting this internal server error. So this is something I got a little earlier. And this is something I didn't run into before when we were working with the Devise JWT gem. And it's saying that we're getting a session disabled error. And in order for this to work, we have to enable and configure the session store. I have mixed feelings about this because we're really not using sessions. So I was curious looking at this, like where this was coming from, where it was looking for that to exist. And it does seem like it's it is coming in the registrations controller. This might just be one of those things that they changed internally since. Because I don't think, yeah, we're not actually explicitly ever calling the sign-in method. But from what I've read, it does come from the sign-in method. That's what's causing this. And we can see it actually, there's sign-in here from the sign-in out controller in Devise. And that is kind of the culprit here. We could even, let's see if it lets me look at this code. Okay, the live Devise controller sign in out. So let's copy this and see if we can go to GitHub and find this. Okay, so we sign in out, and then it's the sign in method. So resources or scope. And essentially, let's see if we can see where it's actually session serializer store. So it seems like there's also, let's see if set user is in here. Okay, so it's doing this. All right, what I'm just gonna do nothing. They're already signed in. Set user. Okay, so then set user is where it's coming from. So let's look at set user and warden. Warden authenticate. Yeah. So what? Oh, don't FaceTime. That's okay. So when I Googled this, there was a thread that goes to Devise. It goes to Devise JWT in particular. There are a couple of links, and it seems like it's a Devise related piece. And they were saying getting rid of the timeoutable module helped it for some of them, but it didn't for others. And it did seem like a few people added these configurations, and that solved the issue for them. Again, I just don't feel super great about enabling the cookies in the sense that I don't know how much they're actually getting used here. Like ideally we could just tell Devise to not try to use the session store. And this seems like this guy had a workaround for it of basically faking the session hash because we're not actually using it. And this was the fix that that they were recommending. I think I might actually try this because I don't think I want to actually enable cookies here, enable sessions, because it's not the way this API is designed to be used. So, and they're going app controllers concerns, and then RackSessionFix. So I'm going to do RackSessionFix. And then we'll put this in here. And I'm gonna have to update the blog post with this. And then we need to include this in the looks like maybe just those controllers. We'll see. Might have to come back to this and see. It seems like that's what they did. So let's see if we go to registrations and then we include this and then we do it. Probably want to do it in sessions too. And then what we'll do is we can try to see if we can send that same request from Postman and see if that goes through at this point. So let's sign up. There we go. So we got a 422 saying the user couldn't be created successfully because the email's already been taken, but that is a response. That's what we would expect. So we should be able to log in. And now we're getting wrong number of arguments, expected 1, 0. Okay, so this looks like we actually have a syntax error in the controller. So let's look over at the user session serializer here. So let's just read login, respond with data, new resource. And the error is given 1, expected 0. UserSerializer line 6. Let's look at UserSerializer line 6. Ah, yeah. We needed to have string format time there. So let's put that in there and give this another shot. Logged in successfully. Awesome. And then if we look at our headers, we can also see we have this authorization header now. And this is the actual, this is the header we want. And we're going to do I'm not gonna scope this because we might have a need for it a couple different places. But we'll do JWT token. Actually, we need to I'm gonna globally scope it here. So what this will let me do now is I can say later on we're actually going to add this current user endpoint so we can see what this token lets us do. But right now we could be able to log out. So if we log out currently without anything in the headers, we get that 401 couldn't find an active session. And again, that's coming from our code. It's coming from this logic. So if we can't find a current user on destroy, then we render this response. If we can, then we render this response. So then what we can do is in the headers of this request, we can say, I want to put in the JWT token. And when I send it now I get logged out successfully. And then I can go send it again. And that should give me a new token. Should be able to log out. Couldn't find an active session because it's using that variable. So I need to basically update this. Right, this needs to be my new value. Right, to that. And it's not, no, it wasn't. So we'll log in, take this, store it as a variable, log out with that one. Grr. Okay, so we put this in, I'm going to copy and paste, see if it works. Okay, so something about my understanding of the way these variables work is not helping very much here. But essentially the token that we get back from logging in, we can use to log out. And later on, we'll use it for current user. To that end, let's get to that because that's one of the last things that we have left to do. So let's add in a current user endpoint. I'm going to shut down the server real quick here. We're going to do Rails generate controller current user. And we'll just give it an index action here. And then in the routes file, for this, we're just going to remove the /index part and get this to the current user index. Current user index action. And then in this controller, in current user controller, we're going to first, before anything happens, we're going to authenticate the user. And this is going to send a 401 response now if we don't have somebody logged in. And then we're going to render JSON, make a new instance of the serializer with the current user as the argument, and then we'll do serializable hash data attributes. Cool. And that's the stuff that we want to send back. And we can add a status. Okay, it's the default, so it'll come either way, but if we want to be explicit, we can do that. And now what this is going to let me do is I can use that token we were just looking at Postman. I logged out successfully. I'm going to get a new one. Connection refused because the server's off. So start the server again. And we'll send this request. And then we're going to get a token. And we can use that token in a request to the current user endpoint. And now we get undefined method UserSerializer for current user controller. Is this me misspelling it again? I misspelled it last time too. Let's see. UserSerializer. That looks okay. Copy. Paste. It certainly looks okay. Interesting. Application controller. Okay, so for some reason, this controller, these controllers can access that file, but this one can't. That's a little odd. Undefined method user serializer. Why is it thinking of it as a method and not recognizing it as a class? What have I done here? Application. User serializer. Oh, got to do .new. Duh. Okay. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay. Yeah, it was thinking of it as a method because I put parentheses after it without calling new on it. Okay, cool. This is me being tired at the end of the day. So we got the ability to get a current user. We're able to, we didn't test sign up. So let me sign up with a different email address here. Cool. So this gives us a response, and we can also log in now with that other user. And we get the authorization header. Right? If we copy that and send it here, now we get that user back. Right? So we get a way of identifying the user on the server side. So remember, the current user is what's coming back from that request. So essentially, the token is taking the place of the cookie and identifying the user to your backend. Right? And your token, you can store that in state client side after the user is logged in, and then they can you can configure your requests to include that token after that point for any requests that require authentication. Cool. So I just have a little bit of an update to do this post, but I'll get that on the internet briefly. And then my goal is to turn this into a template that y'all can use. If you'd like to set this all up without actually doing all that configuration that I did, you'll have the template to go off of. So the idea would be this stuff that we did was about figuring out getting the endpoints working for auth. And then we might also want to add our spec Rails for testing. And then we want to put in, should be in a group for testing. And then we'll have the, I'll probably get factory bot and a couple other things here that I'm always using for the template purposes of the template. But the other thing, there was one more thing I wanted to maybe do, but I'm not remembering. And I'll write up some instructions of how to use the template because there are a few things that you're gonna have to do. You'll still have to do, mainly with with regards to the credentials. So the secret key, this master key, you won't have. So you'll need to regenerate that, delete this encrypted credentials YAML file, and I think if I remove that file, it might even make it easier for y'all to do this because it'll notice that file's not there and it'll create it for you. I'm going to experiment with that. I'm going to try that actually. I'm going to try deleting this file and seeing if that helps with the template. So we'll prepare for template. And then I'm going to make a repo for this. So we'll go over to GitHub. And I'm going to make a new repository for Devise Rails, Devise JWT template. Already create it. Push from an existing repo. Change the settings to make this a template repository. Go back here. Cool. And then we'll make a template. Temp test. And I'll write up these instructions, but I think I'm going to remember them relatively well here. So the goal is you just copy that code and then you can clone it. And then you can run, open the window. And then when you've got it on your machine, you need to, before, let's see what this, let's just do bundle. You do bundle. And then we will do, what else? Rails DB create. Oh, no. That's the last thing we do. So we need to look through the project for any time that Rails JWT template appears. Just no time. Okay, Rails Devise JWT template. So we need to replace that with something else. Because those are all things that we're going to need. When we create a new database, we can't create another database of the same name, and you don't want to call it the template. You want to call it the name of your actual app. So doing that will help you with that. Create and DB migrate. And then we're getting key not found secret key base. So in this case, we can do editor equals code wait. And then we can do Rails credentials edit. You can open this, just close it. And then we can try Rails DB create, DB migrate. Okay, that worked. And then we can do Rails S. And then we'll go over to Postman. And no, this is a new database now, so we should be able to post to sign up with the same credentials, just test at test.com, and this should work now. And it does, awesome. And then we should be able to log in with those credentials, test at test.com. And looks like that worked too, 200. Yeah, and we got the authorization header. We can copy all this. Oh boy. And then we can send it to current user. Boom. All right. So we now have a template that works with just a couple of steps to get auth with JWT working. If you want to use this as a starting point, feel free. And I'm going to be working on adding some tests to this as well. And ideally, I'd also like to set up in a previous project I was using RSpec API documentation, this gem that was generating some docs that could be hosted via Slate or rendered via Slate. They've been like a Slate output format. Had some issues with it on my new machine. It worked. Had it set up on my old laptop. I'll see if I can get that set up in the template, because it would be really awesome if the tests also could create docs. And that would be part of, like, your docs would just be on GitHub and they would be built at an accessible URL based on the tests that are already written. And then you can add your own, and those would also generate additional docs. So I'll see if I can figure that out and integrate that in the template as well. And we'll see if I can add another episode to this when I do. But the links to the code and the template, all that should be included in the YouTube video or on my blog or wherever you happen to be looking at this. Just want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to look through this. Hope it was fun, helpful, and I look forward to seeing you sometime soon. Hey, bye, everyone.